And I would do it over and over and over again until I felt it. And part of that was, I remember at one point, I started crying about 2 months after Dad had taken us. And we were in the van, and he says, "What's the matter?" And basically, I tried to lie, but he was like, "Don't you ever cry for that woman ever again. She doesn't deserve it. She's a bitch. She's a whore. She's this. She's this. She's this." And he went on, and I just was like, I'll never cry again. My sister was like, "Don't ever cry." I never cried again, and I could feel pain, and all through clear to my adult years, pain is real. I can feel it. I can analyze it. I can adjust with it, and it started way back then. So if I felt I was out of line or weird, I'd hit myself. I'd pinch myself. I just did some really, really, I guess you'd say, not to deviate, but very, hard things to myself. And then later in junior high years, go ahead. And later it turned into, go ahead. I said later, in my junior high years, because there really wasn't counseling, I used to take those mechanical pencils. I would take the metal tip of it, and I would dig it into my thumb or into parts of my arms, and I'd dig it back and forth in a straight line until I bled, because I felt real, and I felt almost like nurturing with it, because there really wasn't any, since I was abducted, there really wasn't any real love. It was nurturing and pain.
Right. So you really felt the loss of the loss of love in your life. You felt the loss of your own identity in some ways in your life, and you felt torn between two people who you loved, your father and a mother. And even though one did something bad, and in your eyes both kind of did, because your mom didn't look for you and your father took you away from something that you did love. It was really hard to I guess, especially in the eyes of a child, to bring these two dichotomies together. And so, when the happy event happened and Mom, found you and brought you home, it wasn't that happy, because this was the woman who you didn't know anymore, you didn't love anymore, who had abandoned you, in effect. Dad went to jail, so, you didn't really have a right to be happy. Why was it so much easier to reach out to the grandparents?
My grandpa was always been really stern. Always looked, he always reminded me of the Rifleman, that old television show, but he had that warmth about him like a grandparent, I should say. And my grandma I remember coming down in Sacramento airport, and coming up to the runway to at the end of we come off the plane, and seeing them, all those flashing lights and so forth in the news. There's Grandma. And Grandma never changed, and Grandpa never changed. My mom had changed. She seemed very distant and very, very hard. Of course, kids are stolen. But there they were, and opening hands. She smelled the same. Luckily my grandma never smelled like formaldehyde like some grandparents, but she smelled the same, and she was very loving. She caressed and held me. Where my mom, when we first arrived at the courthouse, which it was a setup, because my dad had been arrested and then released because Texas didn't acknowledge the federal warrant, and then they had to kind of get him back into a place they could recapture him. And I remember looking up and seeing this woman that had pretty much in my mind had disappeared. I couldn't remember what she really looked like, and so here she was, and she came down the stairs of the courthouse, and she brushed my head, and I remember saying, "I don't want you pulled away." At the same time, I was like, "This is my mom," because the first thing she did, she brushed my hair, which I've always had this thing with her, with her brushing my hair. Mm-hmm. And then because I was being pulled from my family, all I knew with her, I really hated her. And at that point, of course, I felt like it was just my brother and I. So the plane ride back, there really wasn't this connection with like, oh, this is my mother. It was this woman that had just taken all I knew away from me, which wasn't a lot. I mean, when they got us, I was covered in chiggers, and I had, rashes, and I was living in I was living in some bad area. It's out by Page, Texas. It was a home that Dad had to basically get the well going. The water was always rusty color. We boiled the water for the bathtub on the cast iron bathtub on the wood burning stove, and everybody rotated through the same water. Of course, I was always laughing, take baths together. And we actually had a working outhouse. It wasn't the best environment, so that was part of the reason I guess my mother got me back, because she smelled clean. The kids recognized the differences in their living conditions, and And here I am with this woman that I remember when I first got back with them, that I was back in this environment with this really rich